apologize for that for last time. But what we're going to do is we're going to go and do a report. One's going to be on the Bank of England, Mark Carney, and how he basically sounds like one of us over here, where he's now talking. Well, not that we're suggesting moving to a one world currency, but that the days of the dollar are numbered. Then we're going to discuss Donald Trump and all the crazy tweets that he has coming out, and just tons of stuff going on right now. And like I mentioned, we are still getting set up over here. We've got John Sneisen coming from Winnipeg, Manitoba. So how's it going today, John?
Oh, it's going very good over here. It's a busy day. Had some pound emergency just a little while ago. The dog wasn't doing too well, so we nursed her kind of back for a little bit. So I hope that it's she's gonna make it through today, but we'll see.
Yeah, our thoughts are with your puppy right now, because that's something that nobody obviously wants to have to face.
Yeah,
But
it's life, unfortunately, but yeah, no, it's never fun.
Yeah, before we get going, I also want to make a announcement that Kingsley Edwards and Aaron Nakamoto have gotten engaged and are putting the marriage on the blockchain. So congratulations to Kingsley and Aaron before we get going.
Very much congratulations to them. Yeah, that's I love how they go all in. They don't want to put it on the government in a government contract. Instead, they're gonna actually put it on something that's truthful and that won't lie to you.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. I just realized that my face was having a huge amount of light coming in. So, of course, my kids are getting home right this second, right as we're starting this. But anyways, let's get to it without further ado. I just wanted to confirm that we were live streaming. So what we're going to do first, I'll mention some of the conferences that are coming up, places people can catch us streaming. Then do a quick little disclaimer that it's not financial advice. Then we'll right get into the Mark Carney articles, if that's okay with you.
Mm-hmm. That sounds very good with me.
Okay, I'll kick it off. So I'll just make sure that it's focused on me for a second. Okay, here we go. Hi everyone, this is Tim Picciott, the Liberty Advisor, and we are streaming live today. It is Monday, August 26th, and we are coming live from Phoenix, Arizona, and we are joined by one of the best economic analysts around, John Sneisen. You guys all know him. You guys all love him. How's it going, John?
It's going really good over here in Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada.
Awesome. Well, speaking of Winnipeg, Manitoba, we'll get a couple housekeeping items out of the way first. We've got Josh, who is traveling around Europe right now, and we appreciate the opportunity to be able to use this platform while he's over in Europe, and wish him safe travels over there. Also want to mention John has his Winnipeg Crypto Conference coming up, so you guys can check that out at I believe it's winnipegcryptoconference.com, or you guys can search engine that, and that will find it. Also want to mention that we are live streaming to DLive, Float.app, and of course Facebook, Twitch, some other places, but we would rather you guys watch this at DLive or Float and not really support the man, or just have some backup channels. And these shows will be turned into two different reports, and these reports will also be on BitChute as well, commercial free. Also on my podcast as well, commercial free. So for people that are complaining about that, and a quick disclaimer: although we're going to be talking about a lot of financial stuff, everyone always says these and says, "I'm not a financial advisor." Well, I'm like the one guy out there that is a financial advisor. So unless I'm your financial advisor, that this is for informational and educational purposes only. But man, do we have some fireworks to talk about today. So Mark Carney is the former Bank of Canada central banker, head central banker, now with the Bank of England, which is just a crazy enough thing in and of itself, that you can have central bankers who have an allegiance to one country who are then leading another country's central bank. This seems sort of like a crazy concept, even though I guess the Queen of England does really control what's going on over in Canada as well. But Mark Carney, he's not just some guy like me or John saying this. He is the head of the Bank of England, and really there was two different bombshell articles that came out through Zero Hedge. One of them was entitled "Why Mark Carney Thinks the Dollar Can No Longer Be the World Reserve Currency." And mind you, this is coming from Mark Carney. This is not coming from John and I. And then the other one is titled, "In an Unprecedented Shocking Proposal, Bank of England's Mark Carney urges replacing dollar with a Libra-like reserve currency." And I know that I've got a lot to talk about in that one, but what I'll do is I'm going to get into the article right now, and then we'll have John do some commentary on this. But according to the article, Mark Carney, titled "The Growing Challenges for Monetary Policy in the Current International Monetary and Financial System," where he dedicated no less than 23 pages, which is stunning for a central banker, to cause why the dollar's destabilizing reserve status role in the world economy has to end, and why central banks need to join together to create their own replacement reserve currency, one potentially tied to Facebook's new stablecoin Libra, although in reality any synthetic hegemonic currency, as Carney defined it, would do. But first, a quick tangent. The reason we say Carney's speech, I'm still reading here, Carney's speech was shocking is not for what it proposes, after all. We have long argued that a world in which the dollar's reserve currency status would be stripped away by the establishment and granted to some alternative, whether gold or a basket of currencies like the IMF SDR, that's a special drawing right, or a cryptocurrency like Bitcoin. In coming posts, and they listed some of the posts. One of the posts was called "Game Changer: Is Libra the Trojan Horse for an SDR-backed redesign of the global financial system?" And I sort of want to pause it right there because I predicted that the Libra would be based off the SDR and that maybe they were a little bit too big for their britches and basically tried to preempt this, or it could be the Trojan horse like we saw in 1913 when JP Morgan owned all the big banks. And what was JP Morgan telling everybody? He was telling everybody that the Federal Reserve Act was the worst. Well, actually, I don't think he was telling anybody because I think he died like 2 years before. But anyways, his newspapers that he owned like 95% of were telling everybody that the Federal Reserve Act was the worst thing ever to happen to the big banks. So who knows? Maybe all these big institutions are saying, we don't like Libra because really they want the people to think that if the banks are going to adopt anything, that people won't like the banks. Then again, people don't like Facebook, and I don't know if there's that much 4D chess going on here. But I ultimately think that this is where the path is going, is that they want to have a digital currency that can track, trace, and surveil you. And so, John, without me blabbering on, because I'm sure we're going to hear in the comments, what do you think so far about this article and what we've heard from Mark Carney?
Yeah, no, it's pretty obvious what Mark Carney is doing here. He's of course former Goldman Sachs, for those that didn't know, and that's where it came out of. And another thing that is interesting about him is probably one of the most powerful bankers in the world. Being used to be, well, now he stepped down, but he used to be the head of the Financial Stability Board, a think tank that put up policies for all the major central banks in the G20 nations. So he is not just like a nobody Bank of England chair here. He actually has control and say over the biggest central bankers in the world through the Financial Stability Board he had. Now, of course, that's I think it's a guy from the Fed right now that's stepped in and took over that role. But that is an important role that not very many people are talking about, the Financial Stability Board, which is, of course, an organization of the most, I think it's like 10 or 20 most powerful central bankers in the world that actually gets together and writes policies that they're going to implement in all the different nations around the world and their local central banks. So that's what they're doing over there at the Financial Stability Board. And that's with, of course, any consent whatsoever from anyone. And nobody even knows that they're around. This group that secretively is using the G20 nations. They put out the bail-in regime. They actually pushed that forward. They pushed forward the legislation on stopping Bitcoin by putting caps on cash and everything, so it's harder to get into the cryptocurrencies. They put on other legislations around it. They put on the TLAC, total loss absorption, and the living will rules that we see that banks have to do now in case of a bankruptcy. They have to actually put out their will with what's going to happen when they go bankrupt. So these guys, they're around and they're controlling everything. And of course, him saying that we need a global world reserve currency that's Libra like currency. Of course, Libra is a piece of trash that was put forward by Facebook because they don't know what they're doing over there with Facebook. They don't have any really good blockchain experts that really put it together for them. It's more of like a control grid and more of a competition to I don't know which one would be the best, but it's definitely not Bitcoin. It's far like like people were awaiting this because they were like, oh, it's going to start competing with with Bitcoin. Well, it didn't at all. Like the cryptology and everything is not very good, and of course it's very centralized. You have nodes that cost through the shirt to run, of course, so it's no decentralization, and the people that are going to be in charge of the Libra nodes will have to pay a lot of money. I forgot what it was, but I think it was something like $100,000 or more or million. I forgot that number, Tim. Maybe you remember it, but it's
It
insane
was
that
it was 10 million.
Oh, 10 million. Yes, sorry, I was way off. And of course, that shows you that they're trying to force people to like out of that system and keep the oligarchy in control of that. Their private banking system that they're trying to put together. That's basically what it is. It's not really a blockchain, decentralized blockchain like Facebook, Bitcoin and others. It's actually a utility, I don't know, utility money that could move very fast around the world for very little cost, which is a lot better than what we have today. But it's still run by a very sinister institution that is censoring everyone. And then of course they would have loved to have full control over money and have Libra be the world reserve currency, seeing Zuckerberg over there just drooling and being able to further control the world and censor everyone that it doesn't like. So that comes under that. But of course, the central bankers there, Tim, this is the problem. Like, they gone monetarily insane, and them saying this is just a natural outcome of their being desperate because they don't know really what to do. They know that their current fiat currency system is at its last legs, and they're trying to find ways to fix it or put in another standard. Now, problem is that with a lot of different standards, even a Libra-like currency, you still have that old control grid in place. And if you believe that they are gonna save you with or save the monetary system, you're so far off, because these guys don't understand monetary history, it seems like, or they just blatantly ignore it because they know that they could highly benefit from printing this money. It just becomes obvious that they have no clue what they're doing, really, most of them, and they're just desperate. We were talking about Trump floating 50 and 100-year bond idea. Then we were talking about, of course, the 100-year bond that completely went bust in Argentina. Right before now, of course, their currency devalued 30-something% and totally collapsed over there. And we see this all around the world, where central bankers are getting desperate because it's not the trade issues between China and the US. That's quite minor. What really is worrying people that nobody's talking about in mainstream media is actually the debt levels around the world that is so substantially high that we never have seen this high in history. And of course, countries like Norway, Canada, New Zealand has some of the worst housing bubbles in the world. I was just in Toronto, take a look at Toronto, where talking about Carney, right? Carney man, which is a man that is a carnival man. He puts out entertainment and fakery. That's what he's doing. And of course, Toronto and Canada is kind of the remnants of Mark Carney's policy of money printing and pushing down interest rates to close to zero.
It is amazing, though. It is amazing how honest these guys get as they're either leaving office. I mean, you read what Alan Greenspan said before he got into office, or you read what Alan Greenspan said after he got out of office, and not that it's even in office, but in his position, and they sound a lot like us. And here's one quote from Mark Carney. We note, and this is from Zero Hedge. It says, Carney's proposal comes just a few months before he's due to step down from his position leading the Bank of England. We note that because it is a well-known fact that central bankers tend to speak the truth once they have quit their position of power and influence, yet it is quite shocking for Carney to do so while still in office. The bottom line, Carney sounded nothing like less than an Austrian school economist who admits that the existing neoliberal Keynesian system has collapsed. He said that, this is Carney, in the short term, and I think this is actually key here, in the short term, central bankers must deal with the situation as it is. But he also warned that the blithe acceptance, which makes you think of like Blythe Masters, but the blithe acceptance of the status quo is misguided, and dramatic steps will ultimately be needed. It's what he said next that was stunning. In the longer term, we need to change the game, Carney said. When change comes, it shouldn't be to swap one currency hegemony for another. And what I'm going to show now on the screen is, I think a chart probably a lot of you guys have seen before, but it's reserve currency status does not last forever. And John, what we're showing here is it shows, Portugal from like the late 1400s up until like Columbus time. Then Spain had it for about 100 years, and Netherlands probably had it for 40, 50 years, and France maybe had it for another 40, 50 years, and Great Britain maybe for another 50 years. Now the U.S. is probably on about a 50-year time span also as well right now. So it's just absolutely, it's certainly overdue. But what they're saying is, we don't want to just swap out, the dollar hegemony for like the Chinese yuan, or for even go back to one of these other countries from the past. Is that what we need is we also realize that this is a race to the bottom, and it's not really fair that, that the U.S., is basically a dwindling amount of the dollar trade that's going on. And actually Mark Carney goes on to say, the dollar is the global currency. We know that. The challenge is that the U.S. share of the global economy has been reducing. The dollar share of payments, not just financial assets, but payments, a lot of payments of countries that have nothing to do with the U.S. make payments in dollars. And what happens in situations like we're in tonight, where the U.S., to its credit, is relatively strong, doing better, the Fed has been doing the right thing. They have adjusted, I wouldn't go that far. They have adjusted policy. They have tightened policy as it was strengthening. Now they're doing the right thing, but they adjusted and it is relatively strong. That means the rest of the world is tighter than it needs to be, and that the feedback...
Relatively strong.
Yeah, relatively, to everyone else that's negative. On the U.S. economy in a way that ultimately slows the economy, and it leads to a substandard outcome. And in a world where you only have limited policy space, it is a dangerous place to be. So the trade issues we're talking about are reinforced by the structure of the monetary system. Now the issue is you don't just jump into something new overnight. And what we want in a multipolar world, I think we would agree, we have a European engine, we've got a Chinese engine, we've got the U.S. engine of this economy. A multipolar world, you need a multipolar currency. The question is, how do you get it? And I laid out the ideas of how you'd get there, because he has a 23-page article and basically says we either need the Libra or something like the Libra. And I think what he meant is something like the Libra. I mean, I see like no circumstance where these guys actually allow Facebook to be the monetary heroin dealers, but it's absolutely crazy. I mean, and then he was also saying this to a bunch of people, academics and central bankers at Jackson Hole. So it's not like he was just saying this on some random podcast or something. He was saying this to other central bankers at Jackson Hole with Jerome Powell and basically all the world watching. Not that the world, cared, but guys like you and me and a lot of our audience do care about this stuff. But how crazy is this, John?
Well, yeah, most of the Jackson Hole crowd is, of course, a part of the G30, which is the sinister think tank that have all the top central bankers, all the top chairs of the major banks, and the top economists in the world sitting there. And then dictating this. Of course, they put out the cashless system, the policy that we're seeing getting implemented now. Read the Curse of Cash by Kenneth Rogoff, one of the main guys at the G30 group. They had this in the plans for a while that they wanted to go cashless. It's just a matter of like what they chose, and of course we don't know, Tim, how close they are to actually have a system in fruition. They might have something already working totally fine and just waiting for themselves to be able to prick the bubble in the markets and for that to happen, and then they come in and rescue everybody at the end of it with newly printed electronic currency on this new monetary system. Now, of course, that's just one of the things that could happen. We could go back to a stupid paper fiat standard again, which you never know with central bankers today. I think electronic is the way, though, that they would try to go, because it's actually the easiest one to take over and remove people's freedoms in the economy. Of course, they could desperately go back to gold if they implement an electronic system that nobody wants to use, and that will.
And they're gonna merge this with probably like a Chinese social credit score. So then your social credit score is then tied to your monetary, ability to transact in the economy. And what people who don't like crypto don't understand is everything is going digital one way or another. So, you can either try to then have people go the right way and go, the privacy route, or it's going to be the track, trace, surveilled route. And so I think that they're going to wait for something to get really, really bad, and then they're going to wait for people to come in to beg for the solution. That's why you had, Paul Warburg, the creator of the Federal Reserve System, said we shall have a one world government. It's only a matter if it's through consent or conquest. And what they don't really care about one world government. They want a one world monetary system, because a monetary system, like Lord Nathan Rothschild, I care not who makes the laws, as long as I only care about who controls the money, and I control the money. And so, believe me, these guys, they're going to, like Rahm Emanuel said, they're not going to let a good crisis go to waste. And here I am just speaking over here in quotes. And but it's quotes from all these top globalists. And so it's so obvious what they're going to do, how they're going to use, the Hegelian dialectic of problem, reaction, solution, where they've already messed things up so bad. They originally wanted to have, Hillary get in, start a war with Russia or whoever, and then have them be the bad guys, or the boogeymen, so to speak. So then now we've got a convenient excuse to blame it on, as opposed to being able to blame it on the actual underlying systemic problems that I don't care who can fix it. In my support of Donald Trump, in 2016, I hate even saying that, but it was because I wanted him to be able to pick up the pieces, not to be the guy that tries to hold everything together. So then that way, all the free market, smaller market, Republican Tea Party people are the ones who are going to get the blame, because that's absolutely what's going to happen. I can see it a mile away. And yeah, we've just been calling this, left and right. But yeah, see Mark Carney actually talking about this. I mean, this is the game plan, people. And I don't know how much more we want to talk about this, because I know that you've had a lot going on. I've got my kids home. I don't know if you want to maybe kind of wrap this up. We could do a video on some of Trump's tweets and some of the trade war, if you wanted to. If you got
let's go straight at that. But yeah, let's wrap it up here. So. It's just enough. Take a look at what's happening. Actually, the U.S. dollar yield curve just inverted again today. For those that wasn't aware of that, we just posted about that at World Alternative Media. So it clearly is telling us that a crisis is coming, and of course the yield curve 10 out of 13 times it's been predicting a crisis, and 7 out of 7 of the last ones when the yield curve inverted, that was a market calamity. So something is coming when the yield curve inverts, and there's no way out of it. They manipulated the system, and they got Monterey insane, of course, because that's what you would do if you actually use a flawed criminal Ponzi scheme system to scheme people over for how many years. We're looking at about 48 years now that they've been scamming and scheming money off of people and enriching themselves. Meanwhile, the slaves are sitting there in mass amounts of debt. I saw they're putting people in student loan prison if they don't pay their student loans.
The Texas Marshals are coming after people now.
It's this is so funny how this is working. It's basically they're indebting everybody. Nobody can pay back their money, and then they're just going to put everybody in the gulag, I guess. Because we've overindulged on debt and didn't understand the monetary system. So that's I think
25% of the world's prison population is not enough in America. So now we need to go after everyone that spent $250 million on a gender study.
Well, yeah, the thing is, like, to pay the dividends, they need to fight inflation, which is getting printed constantly by new debt into the world, right? So they need more, dividend to pay to the shareholders. So they need to print more money. And they need more, slaves that they could use and, of course, employ for dollars, and then, be able to make some money off of those slaves while they're in there as well. So this is just like when you corrupt the monetary system, you corrupt everything within it and the whole planet. And I think, Tim, I'm going to end this on a note of hope, and I truly see the blockchain, the decentralized forms of blockchain that's out there, that they could really, if we really concentrate our focus on those for the next 2 to 3 years before things gets really, really bad, but they could go bad at any time now. But if you really focus our time on developing things, I know one of our friends, Anthem Blanchard, has actually developed a fully functional supply chain that would remove out of governments, out of corporations, everything, the lies and deception that's in the numbers that they put out, then everything would have to be fully open and truthful to everyone. And I think that might be a revolution. I know we're talking about privacy as well, but I think by having that open honesty as well, on top of that, maybe that will change the way humans are. And of course, it will replace the need for any government around, right? So I have some hopes for that, of course, in the future, that we're going to replace all of this, the old Ponzi scheme that is a mass murdering mechanism over time. The amount of people that are basically have killed, due to the money printing that has happened. The famines and everything that you see around the world. All that is caused by this money printing, and it's all on the blood of the hands of Mark Carney and everybody else that's central bankers out there. And I hope they really take a big thought, and hopefully some of them would. Think a second time about being a central banker and what that entails, and hopefully they'll quit in an instant when they actually finally find out what a criminal exercise it is to be a central banker, Tim. And I'm just going to leave it at that. So this is John Sneisen and Tim Picciott sounding out for World Alternative Media. Find the truth, be the change.
Boom. Excellent. Right before we did that, the live stream, the Zoom went down for like a second, but and now when it came back, it somehow came back with the screen actually working, like it should have been the whole time.
There we go.
I don't know why that is, but I did want to interject to make one more comment. That QE actually. Actually, let me just make a quick addendum to this video, I guess, for the people watching. And I do apologize for everybody watching right now because I am trying to mess around with trying to get this corrected. It is beyond frustrating when everything is set up, then right before we go live, the computer doesn't work, and I've got to switch to another computer. But anyways, this is a quick addendum. One of the things I did want to mention that John was talking about, all the monetary stuff that's going on and money printing. Well, for the first time since we ended quantitative easing, I say we, but the United States Federal Reserve ended quantitative easing, that actually the Federal Reserve's balance sheet actually did go up this week. So we've been seeing things going down, and this is actually the first time that the balance sheet of the Fed actually has been going up. So I just wanted to make sure we got that little nugget in there as well.
The minions are panicking.
Okay. Let's see what. Actually, okay. Yeah, here's the article here on that. I couldn't find it in time.
Yeah. So, Tim, let's just take a quick look at some of the questions. Maybe answer 2 questions before we run over to the next article. Since we're live, you might as well, talk. See. If you can just go through some of the questions here, Tim, and then I see there's a lot of stuff coming in here, so there might be some really good good questions for us here. Let's go through some of them.
Okay, let me scroll down. On my restream, I'm only showing. I'm not showing any comments on the YouTube.
That's okay. Let me just look through them here. Someone says that look at what happened to Gaddafi. Who's next? And of course that gold that was in Libya. Who knows where that is now? Because that was actually at the Federal Reserve Bank in New York, if I'm not mistaken. And the people of Libya hasn't seen that back, have they?
I did my website when I first created it. I had an article about that, and I linked it to the actual WikiLeaks where it had I forgot what it was. France's president before Savarsky or Sir Nicholas, whatever his name is, and the whole thing where it was showing where all the dots were connected, and my website went underneath like a major DNS attack that day. Okay, now I can see the comments. I have no idea what's going on. Sorry that the pick was tiny in the beginning. It's super frustrating that I had everything lined up. It was going to look good, and now we had to do a last second panic. But thank you for you guys. Let's see what we've got here. I won't be staying on, but God bless you. God bless you as well. Thank you. Somebody said I can hear a naughty child at the start there. Yeah, I've got my kids just came home, 2 and 4-year-old. Any new currency must be backed by gold, otherwise it is worth nothing. Just manipulated. Yep, sort of agree there. They're not. Yeah, we're not. Well, so as we said, we're not watching the chat. What we're doing is we're watching the chat afterwards. So we're making one of our videos and watching the chat. And for some reason, I had a thing where it aggregates all of my chats together from every single platform. But for some reason, it only showed 2 comments. And I'm like, okay, maybe people really don't like us.
Tim, somebody was talking there about someone that wrote an article. Let's hear. Sell worse than December can arrive in a week, says analyst who was predicting the Lehman-like drop. Have you seen that article? It's I think it's a CNBC article. Somebody was saying.
Who predicted the market crashing? I don't know, but I mean, if somebody wants to, Google that for us while we're up here and see who that was, we'd be happy to comment on that. I know there's a lot of people that did that, now after the fact claim that they were talking about this. See, the real target of Libra is to be smartphone users in 5 years without banks, etc. Yeah, I agree with that. All right, here. Let's see. A lots of comments on the Libra. But no, appreciate these comments coming in because we've been shadow banned a lot, and so basically, unless there's people commenting or liking, they really do suppress the message of what's going on here.
Yeah, this one is 20 days ago here. Hold on. Let me see if I can find this article up here for people.
We've got
it's a Nomura analyst. Who's the guy at Nomura? Oh yeah, here we go.
They have a lot of good stuff going on. Let's see.
Masanari Takada. He predicted the possibility of a Lehman-like shock. So that's the guy. He's from Nomura Capital, and of course it's so funny how the bankers can predict their own demise. That's pretty hilarious. And of course the Lehman-like shock, I believe, is going to be Deutsche Bank. Tim, I don't know about you, but I looked too much into Deutsche Bank to think that Deutsche Bank is going to be anything that's safe for the world economy. Of course, they're
in late 2015, it was between Deutsche Bank's. Again, as a financial advisor, this is not financial advice. I'm just purely speculating, hypothetical. But I thought it was going to be Lehman, Santander, because they were subject to all these
auto loans,
subprime auto loans in particular.
Yeah, there's $52.3 billion subprime auto loans, by the way, that has been put into derivatives. So who knows how much that is.
I was also thinking maybe Vancouver real estate or some sort of Canadian real estate. And I remember telling one of my buddies that in 2015. He's like, wait, you want to bet against Canadian housing? It's your big player.
Well, Toronto's really struggling. I talked to people locally there, and they were telling me it's not good. Prices have dropped about 20% so far. And there's not a lot of people trusting in the big condo manufacturers. There's a lot of issues there have been where they've just been building so rapid, the construction there, that's very low quality construction wise. So there's a lot of issues there as well, Tim, with Toronto, but also Vancouver is a massive bubble. We got I think it's Auckland, which is the capital of New Zealand. They are in a huge bubble, and of course Australian banks are one of their biggest lenders to New Zealand. So Australian banks is probably also on the hook, and in their own country they have their own collapse that has started to happen, right, with their housing, and they're just trying to prop it up a little bit more now by pushing interest rates a little further down to see if people can survive. But when people are starting to struggle at 1.75, or it's a fixed rate. If it was a fixed rate, it would be at 2.9 currently in Canada for a 3-year or 5-year term. That is when you struggle at that amount to pay back, then we're in some serious troubles, because the last problem that really created a bubble back in the 80s when I don't know about your parents, Tim, but my parents, they of course got heavily hit. My dad, he lost his business because the loans were too big to pay back.
My parents were actually in high school in the 80s, so my parents were very young. My parents had me at 19 and 20 years old, so
yeah, no, I was born in 84, and I guess your parents were a little too early with you, Tim. Over there, your parents were pretty young, in the 80s, weren't they?
Yeah, 19 and 20, because I was supposed to be born in 85, but I was born in 86. But anyways, yeah. It's just funny. Time, this is a quick personal story. The first time I met John, he thought that I was 40-something years old, and it turns out that I was actually younger than him. So remember that.
Yeah, that was the funniest thing, Tim. Yeah, you're actually younger than me, so much for me. I'm the old guy here at Wam still. I had my hopes up that somebody older than me would contribute, but of course not. And old, 35 is not really old for a lot of our audience, are baby boomers. I know that. And so we're just little babies to them still. And we're just doing our best here to try to, understand the world economy and really dig in our knowledge and trying to excavate as many good nuggets out of the ground as possible for everybody to. So hopefully, through our opinions, and of course, Tim can give a little bit of advice, but from my opinion, be able to maybe direct you to a little bit better and prosperous life when the actual monetary apocalypse will happen, because that's a set to happen. Of course, now that you have Mark Carney going out there and talking about this, Tim, it's pretty obvious that this is going to happen, that they're desperate to try to fix the system, and Yeah, I don't know. To
The system
there's
cannot be fixed. But
no,
before we're both running out of time before your battery ends,
yeah,
I don't know if you want to kick off the. Do you want me to kick it off? Or you kick it off for the Trump
yeah. Let's
Twitter
do a
tweets.
quick 5-10 minute video, another report. So what me and Tim are doing here, we're actually putting together a couple of reports as we're doing our live stream. Do
We
two
just
things
saw. We
at
just got
once.
the black screen of death just came up.
Uh huh. There we go. Am
Yep.
I good? Yeah.
Yep. We're good.
Okay. So yeah, I would say let's do it for 7 minutes. Put out a quick, short to the point report. How about you start, Tim, because you looked a little bit more into this, his tweets and everything than me, and then I'll add on to it after.
Yeah, this is gonna be high level, but everyone, this is Tim Picciott coming live with you, also with John Sneisen with World Alternative Media, and today we're going to talk about the ongoing China trade dispute that is going on. That seems like it's getting wilder and wilder by the day. And just at a really really high level, what seems to be going on is that every time the market's doing well, then Trump will then throw some sort of monkey wrench in there because all of a sudden now what this means is that when things are going well, then there's less of a chance of getting a rate cut. So actually, John, your screen just went out once more. But what I think is going on with all this is that Trump wants a rate cut, and something that I talked about back in March was that I think he is forcing a rate cut, and how he's forcing a rate cut is by throwing this extra turmoil into the system. He is then going to create this chaos and calamity, which will then basically force the Fed's hand to have to get a rate cut. And so, what's really crazy is going on is that here Trump is saying to China, this is all sort of like paraphrasing, but hey, we're going to slap all these tariffs on you, and then he says, well, wait a minute, we're actually going to take a break because we want to give the American consumers, we don't want to hurt the American consumers, but if I thought that all this stuff was great for American consumers, so why is it going to hurt American consumers if we take the tariffs off? And then all of a sudden, then China, from a negotiation standpoint, is like, well, if you're doing this because you don't want to hurt the American consumers, then why don't we just sort of pounce right now? And then so then China pounces, and then Trump's like, oh wait, well I'm actually gonna put the tariffs back on, and we're gonna put it even at a higher level, and we'll be seeing if the tariffs actually do end up happening, because it would be, I think, so devastating. And at one point the tweet actually in like the middle of a really long tweet, but it says, vast amounts of money made and stolen by China from the United States year after year for decades will and must stop. Our great American companies are hereby ordered to immediately start looking for an alternative to China, including bringing your companies home. I don't use Twitter a lot, so I guess I'm supposed to read up as opposed to reading down. And it's actually crazy if you look at the amount of tweets he's had just since he sent this. It must be like 100. Like, I just had to keep scrolling, and it was only
Twitter
from
man.
like 3 days ago. I mean, it's like more than like a teenage girl. But I actually like his tweets. I don't go on Twitter very much, but I like all the what talking he's doing and all the trash talking he's doing. But unfortunately, what he and Jerome Powell do have something in common, that they both think the economy, that what they're doing is like, it's like a thermostat. They're like, oh, if we can just dial this here a little bit, we can dial this there a little bit, or we can raise an interest rate, but what they're doing is they're playing with a nuclear reactor. They're not playing with a thermostat. And when you're playing with a nuclear reactor, things are going to happen that are going to be outside of your control, more or less blowing things up. And it's going to be all the conservatives, even though we know they're fake conservatives that are in there, a bunch of rhinos, that are going to get the blame for all this. And then we're going to have an even worse person coming in 2020 or 20. And it's really immaterial if we get a hardcore socialist in 2020 or 2024. Really sort of immaterial. So one thing, a quick shameless plug. I think there's going to be a lot of turmoil going on around the election. I think a lot of people are positioned wrong. I think a lot of people think that Donald Trump has a lock to win this. And if Donald Trump ends up losing this, I think it's going to be terrible news for the market. So we actually do have some hedging strategies right now, where if you're a baby boomer right now, if you're close to retirement, you just retired, we have different strategies where we can actually quantify what your max loss potentially could be. What we do is we buy some put options on the downside. But there are smart ways to do this, and there's dumb ways to do it. So we do it, the best way possible. And then what we can say is, okay, depending on your scenario, and this is assuming everything went to zero. So even gold in the portfolio went to zero, which it probably wouldn't. It'd probably go up. But what would happen is, we could say, hey, if everything went to hell in a handbasket, the most you could lose is, let's say, 6, 7, 8%. However, if stuff outside of our control happens and we start printing trillions of dollars, then now we're hedged to the upside as well. Because you don't just want to retain the amount of USD or Canadian dollars or whatever country you're listening to us from in that sort of currency. You want to be able to maintain your purchasing power. And so this is something I thought a lot about. I do have a presentation called, what is it called? Crisis Retiring. So go to thelibertyadvisor.com/crisis retiring. It's the speech that I gave at Jeff Berwick's Dollar Vigilante Summit last year at Acapulco. I think all of it still basically rings true today. But anyways, without further ado, we're going to kick it off to John Sneisen, what he thinks about all this ongoing trade disputes between China and the United States and Trump's Twitter handle and where he thinks things are going.
Well, first of all, people that think that the United States is in great shape is very far out. Of course, the United States will never be able to pay back their debt. They're bankrupt. They could say that, oh yeah, we'll never be able to go bankrupt because we just print our way out of it. Yeah, go ahead, and then you have a hyperinflation on your hand. Of course, I find it so hilarious listening to Trump saying that the Chinese are stealing from them. Well, the Chinese just have printed more currency, and of course, they've been able to, have a massive labor force that they utilized in order to be at a huge competitive advantage, of course, compared to the United States. And of course, it doesn't help that they have their communist regime, forcing them to work for a lot less and be obedient, of course. But it was actually Kissinger that, made the deal back with Mao Zedong back in the day. And he came over there and said that, we could you guys could, use our US dollar as the reserve currency and start trading with it. And with that, we'll actually utilize your massive labor force and be able to take a huge advantage of the cheap labor and then move all our factories over to China. So that's what Trump is really mad at here, is the move that happened by United States corporations out of the country to, have the cheap labor force for manufacturing out in, China is actually now becoming so expensive that there's so many other countries right now, like Vietnam, like Cambodia and other places that are actually getting cheaper and have more slave labor and child labor, of course, than China itself, because China is kind of turning into a very fast version of the United States. So what the United States have seen with the baby boomers and the enrichment you get from printing tons of money in the early stages. So, look at what China has been doing with One Belt, One Road. They've been slushing around debt all around the world. Of course, they've been using the IMF strategy to be able to circumvent, of course, the United States, totalitarianism around the world and control through all their military. They have used a smarter strategy. They built a whole bunch of infrastructure in all these countries instead of giving them just loans. They actually built the infrastructure, gave some benefit to the people, but now the people like Zambia, for example, just got downgraded yesterday again. And Zambia also was the country that the Asia Investment Bank took over the airport, and I believe one of the biggest power generation plants in Zambia. So you're seeing they're using the same strategy as the IMF. It's the same corrupt bankers, but just in a Chinese version. And if you think that that's anywhere different, then of course they're just a little bit more communist than everybody else. I saw a recent video from all these bankers, saying that, oh yeah, China is embracing the free market and it's a free market economy. And then they showed how great the electronic payment system were and the social credit system. But of course, they didn't talk about the
2.2 million Chinese that can't even travel right now because they're dissidents.
I guess they made it before. They put out this great documentary on how great it was to invest in. Of course, like everybody, like Warren Buffett, all the big names, they're all over there in China. Invested substantial amounts. Why they used the Chinese banking system to print. We got to remember the Chinese bubble, the debt bubble that's there is really epic, because they almost went up 1,300 or 1,400% over the last 15 years in the amount of currency printed. So they really printed their money very fast. And of course, they're struggling now with the inflation. People are, of course, keeping gold over there in China. And there's just a recent bank failing. Now, of course, Hong Kong doesn't want anything to do with the Chinese totalitarianism. So they are really struggling there as well. They want be able to have their independence. But of course, China can't have anybody be independent, autonomous from China if they're supposed to be owned by China. So we're going to see a lot of calamity around there, and of course around the world with all the chaos going on. But what we got to remember, it's not all this talk about the trade wars. The most biggest issue is the debt. I don't know how many times we need to say it, but that's the actual real bad issue here, is all the substantial amounts of debt that have been in the private sector, in the corporate, and in the banking sector. It's everywhere, and it's inundated, and it's just like the green goo that is just spreading itself everywhere, and there's nothing that it doesn't eat up and swallow. And soon our planet is basically a dead planet. And if aliens were to come back and look at us, Tim, I think they would be pretty disappointed if they ever created us or something crazy like that. They would come back and see like, oh, these humans, they really screwed up this one.
And let's also point out that these massive debts and deficits are occurring under the backdrop of the supposed greatest economy in the history of the world. And I don't need to belabor that because we spoke on that during the last podcast. And I do apologize because people are out there saying that I'm like a verbal AK-47. Somebody else said the last stream that I was like a machine gun, that I'm talking too fast.
Well, that's pretty good, actually. So, AK-47 is actually a pretty good, old, solid, and reliable gun. So I would.
I'm not Russian. I'm not Russian though. So I guess I'm rushing my talking right now in verbiage. But I don't know, something happens when I start getting into all these different things. My brain just starts going crazy, and I don't know, sort of like an Asperger's. Like I just can't but help it that my brain somehow works better when I start talking a lot faster. But one thing I do want to point out is a lot of people have been commenting that that China is taking advantage of us. Well, what China is doing is China is giving us actual goods. I mean, they might be crap, but they're giving us actual goods, and we're giving them IOUs and zeros on the screen. And so
Americans are buying those goods. If they want to buy American, Tim, go ahead. Start making stuff in America.
No, I hereby order. I hereby order that God Emperor Trump has now ordered that American companies can stop. Right. So there goes before he was elected, I made my first video that I put on my page was called "The Libertarian Case for Trump." Well, I guess that goes out the window, and it won't be.
I think it's more like the emperor doesn't have any clothes kind of guy. I feel like that's Trump for us there.
That's a very bad image, and all this is to blame is from globalism, where all the elite basically sold us all out, and then this is all planned, engineered, orchestrated, not coming as a shock to anybody. But what else is going on? Yeah. But what else is going on in the China trade war is that China's saying we're going to have the last laugh at this, and they also think about it. Z or X or whatever it pronounces his name.
Xi Jinping.
Xi Jinping is a dictator over there. He's a crime minister, as Jeff Baroque would say. He doesn't have to go be reelected in next year. Whereas
he has a limited term now.
Yeah. So he doesn't have to worry about being reelected, whereas Donald Trump needs to worry about being reelected. So if I were the Chinese, there's, as Chuck Schumer said, there's 7 ways to Sunday to get at Donald Trump, because the stock market, whoever has a positive stock market has an 86% chance, the incumbent does, of winning again, their party does, if the market is positive the 2 months prior to an election. And so one of the things I talked about in podcast number 1, so I really encourage you guys to go listen to this, is that Donald Trump, if he were to take the bait on all this, that the other thing he's doing is that the media is then, basically letting him hang himself, giving him enough rope to hang himself, probably really, literally, not like Jeffrey Epstein, who probably didn't really hang himself. But anyways, with Donald Trump, they're giving him, the media, it's very weird that the media was feeding into all this and talking about how great everything is and the economy's going great and basically buying into his ego, because they know that the same people that own the media are the same globalists who engineered this stuff, or the same globalists that control the central banks, or the same globalists that control the real banks, or the same globalists that control the printing presses and the actual presses. And so all they need to do is let him hang himself, go out there, give himself more rope, and then all you have to do is, basically yank some of that rope, or cut, or sow some discernment into the markets right before the election, and then crash things down, and then boom, that could swing a few points, and then Donald Trump loses. I predicted he was going to win last time. Everyone laughed at me, and now all the same people that were laughing at me now think that I'm crazy. 40 days into his re-election, as soon as he bombed Syria, I go, all right, that's it. This guy he's done right now. It was that.
Yeah, so it smells very much like what happened to Obama from Bush, right? Where you had the market collapse that just happened when Bush got when Obama got reelected. It looks very similar to me that what's going to happen there, and it's you could throw like I think there's so many monkey wrenches that could be thrown into the U.S. political. And I don't know even what to call it.
It should have happened
like
in 2014, and what they did was, as soon as we stopped printing money, within days the European central bank started printing money, and then
it's
then
global
the Bank
collusion.
Bank of Japan then started printing money, and then, as we just mentioned during the live stream, that the Federal Reserve balance sheet rose for the first time since quantitative easing ended just this past week. And so it's like this global game of hot potato. And so what happened was, the Federal Reserve kept saying, we're going to raise rates, we're going to raise rates, we're going to raise rates. And then they looked so stupid that by the end of, I think it was 2015, they had to just sneak one in there. And then after Trump had won the election and Obama was the lame duck, then they then put another one in there. And then I think they rose it like 6 times, and they lowered it again once for Donald Trump. But the only reason they were able to raise that is because of all the optimism that was out there. But an economy cannot just run off optimism. The S&P 500 is up about 440% off the lows, whereas the GDP is only up not off the lows, I think, off the lows, whereas the GDP, I was reading earlier today, is only up like 44%. So I think it was went from...
Well, think about it this way, Tim. The actual... I pulled the numbers back in 2018. It was from 2008 to 2018. The actual balance sheets from each and every central bank around the world, and I think I pulled data from about 70 to 80 central banks. The average was 333% of an average increase on their balance sheets, and that's how much money they printed. 300% more money since that time, and that's a pretty substantial number, and it's nothing to joke with, because that's an average of what is that, Tim? That's about an average of 30% every year. Extra money supply in the economy, and of course,
and it's grown about 6% per year, I think, dating back to the 70s, right, or like early 80s. And so that's like the true definition of... They've changed the definition of inflation. The inflation definition used to be about money printing, and now they changed it to the consumer price index, which if you guys want to go get my free book, text Liberty Advisor or World Alternative Media, either one brings you the same place, no spaces, to 71441, and I wrote a book on how they rig these numbers, called To Dispel All Obama's BS. And now I have to rewrite the stuff to then dispel all of Trump's BS. And I was a gigantic Trump supporter. My daughter was born, I like to call it now, Obama's first full day out of office. I was wearing a Donald Trump shirt when my daughter was born. I mean, are you going to say, and then I was on Right Side Broadcasting. I helped reach millions of people the weeks leading up to the election from a page that I just started right before the election. I had fake news go viral 2.5 months before the president even used it. I had said that the Russians were going to be the blame for all this stuff, because the Clintons always blame their enemies for what they're doing, in September of 2016. And so for everyone out there saying that, this guy doesn't really like Trump and he's just trying to say that now to get some, turn people against him, I'm not rooting against Donald Trump. Certainly, no one was more anti-Hillary Clinton than me, but it doesn't do me or my grandchildren or your kids or anyone else's kids here any benefit if we're perpetuating this BS myth of economic stability, when the problem is, if you don't address the Federal Reserve, which addressing it is ending it or having competing currencies, then everything you're doing is papering things over. You're masking the symptoms, and you're not dealing with the root cause. I had confidence that Donald Trump would actually deal with the root cause, and you got all these Q people out there thinking, okay, it's just more 4D chess and just hold your pants over there, and believe me, that Trump is going to end the Federal Reserve. And he was, someone bet me a steak dinner that he was going to do it, last January 15th or something, because Q said it. So I'm still owed a steak dinner. Shout out to Bob Stanley. Thank you.
Well, see, this is the thing, Tim. When the Federal Reserve is like a rotten apple or rotten tomato that you put in a pile of other, apples or tomatoes, and actually over time that rottenness, just spreads into every single tomato in that bag. And that's the way it is. It's
or you could go with the one bad apple spoils a whole bunch. Classic metaphor. Unless you're the police and it's a one bad apple, and they never say the rest of where that metaphor goes.
But it's basically monetary poison that's been put out there to the population back in 1971 when they went off the gold standard. And of course, any centralization of money that they had since 1913, since Christmas 1913, when they created the Federal Reserve, all of that has come into fruition now. And this is like, it's so funny, like when you go and study all kinds of like empires and currencies, they usually last about 100-ish years. Between 80 to 120 years at the most, they last. And it's usually like two full generations through a monetary cycle. And that's what we're seeing now. We had, our two full generations through this whole cycle now. And people have forgotten anything about what was before that. Our great grandparents, there, Tim, what they had to go through back in the day and what they saw when they were alive. Nobody remembers the hyperinflation. It's very few anymore. There's some, of course, in Germany that have seen it, but people tend to completely forget. And of course, there's other countries that are, just infamous for printing money out of thin air. Of course,
People don't even remember what happened
Venezuela,
10 years ago in 2008. People don't even remember back then, and they've
no,
already think it can't happen again.
Yeah, and think about it this time. Like, we've been in such a monetary expansion that we never had. Is it like, I thought it was this is the longest expansion ever we had in the economy, Tim? Is that correct in the stock market?
There is actually an asterisk next to that statement, and I did a podcast on this right around this time last year, and I'm trying to remember exactly what the situation was, but I believe the longest one on record was from 1990 to 2000 when the dot-com bubble, except what happened was when there was a period in around 1990 where the stock market went down, I think 19.98%, which technically 20% would be official correction.
Yeah, so it was,
So technically, you'd have to actually back it to the 1987 crash, but generally held, people count the 19.981 as a market correction when technically it isn't. So even that is freaking fake news. I did a story on that last year, and then I think I talked about then potential black swans, about how the QE is going to ramp, or the quantitative tightening is going to ramp up in October, and that's the time that all hell's going to break loose, and that's what happened. Where apparently Mark Carney and Jerome Powell and all the other 1,000 economists that the government has in the dole couldn't have saw that coming, but guys like you and myself and Josh saw that coming, going all along. But one thing I want to ask some people is, I know you've got to get going here soon, is maybe who you'd like to see us talk to in the future. I am holding up a copy of Creature from Jekyll Island, where a lot of this, this is definitely the Bible on all this information. That I'd highly recommend you guys check that out. But some people I'd like to see. Personally, I'd love to do maybe a joint video with G. Edward Griffin, or maybe one with Mike Maloney, or John Williams from Shadow Stats, or But is there people out there that you guys would like us to reach out to? Realistic. Don't be like get Jerome Powell on, or get Janet Yellen, or So why don't you get Mark Carney on and debate him? But leave it down in the comments if you guys would like anyone that you guys would like to see us bring on as well, and have a discussion with, because things are heating up, and it's John has a lot of stuff going on personally. I have a lot of stuff going on personally today as well, and there's just too much stuff going on right now not to comment on the ongoing financial collapse that we are seeing, because things are just getting crazy. we've got central bankers saying that we're going to have an SDR like Libra currency. That sounded crazy when you and I say it. When G. Edward Griffin freaking, obviously he didn't write about the Libra back then, but a lot of that is predicted in this book.
Hey Tim, if you have any curiosity, I don't know if I've shown you, but I have the SDR owner's manual that was stolen out of a library and resold. So we got that over here at the the place where I have my little bunker over here, where we know what you're up to.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah, no, we're back. Yeah. So we're back, but
You know, I'm on my backup. I'm on my backup computer that's right behind me, and I don't know what is going on with my much better computer. So probably should just wrap this up because I don't know if people can even hear this right now. But if you want to,
So I think we're back on, and I still see the black on our screen, but our screen is a little bit behind. So I think we're good. But I really appreciate all of you guys that have been on here and following us today, and all the great comments. I keep on watching it. We have a very knowledgeable audience here at the World Alternative Media, so we greatly appreciate what you guys are, supporting us and bringing our information out to everybody else. To really save the global economy from this calamity that's coming. That, of course, Powell and everybody else is discussing probably at the Jackson Hole, and just recently. I was there last year talking about what they were doing. But yeah, so let's just finish up here, Tim, and of course you guys should follow us on and subscribe to our Subscribe Star. Support us there. Also, we have the the Winnipeg Crypto Conference coming up October 11th to 13th. The promo code there is WAM, WAM, so you can get 10% off the ticket. It's going to be fantastic. Lots of great people, more and more speakers. Tim is going to be there, and a whole bunch of other fantastic speakers like David Morgan, Anthony Blanchard, Andy Hoffman, and a whole wide array of other really fantastic experts on blockchain and cryptocurrencies. And we're there to promote the future of the world, which is gold, crypto, and blockchain in my point of view. So that's what we're gonna do there. And of course, don't miss Anacadelphia, which is coming up in September, guys. So yeah, so that's it for now. And this is John Sneisen and Tim Picciott signing up from World Alternative Media. Find the truth, be the change.
cool. Well, thank you guys for bearing with us here in some of the technical difficulties. Always something. We're still streaming. If I didn't know if there's any more questions, let me 2 seconds. I'm wrapping up right now. Yeah, my wife actually just came in too, right this second, and is like, hey, we need to wrap this up. Yeah, well, thank you guys for dealing with some of the technical difficulties. It was great talking with you again, John, and I'll talk to you guys later. Thank you for watching.